Title: HOA Karen torched my corn harvest, then panicked when firefighters showed up at her door. The morning the flames rose over my cornfield, I remember thinking the sun had come up too early. For a few seconds I stood on the porch, coffee in hand, watching a column of smoke spiral up into a sky that was supposed to be blue. Then came the crackling, sharp, hungry, like dry bones breaking, and the scent of burning husks rolled over the yard. I dropped the mug. For 12 years that field had been my peace. 12 acres of gold, swaying behind the house I built after my wife died. Every cob, every stalk, carried her memory. The way she'd tie her hair back, the way she'd laugh when the wind made the corn whisper. And now, in a single, awful instant, it was a furnace. I ran. Past the mailbox with the HOA's tidy little emblem. Past the white fences that looked so perfect in their newsletters. Past the line where the association claimed my aesthetic responsibilities began and ended. I didn't care about bylaws. I cared about my land. The heat hit before I reached the edge. The air shimmered like glass. Fire engines hadn't come yet, but I could already hear sirens somewhere down the county road. I grabbed the hose from the side spigot, spraying wildly, uselessly, as flames leapt from one row to another. Behind me came the sound of heels clicking, sharp, deliberate, out of place in the chaos. Mr. Lawson! I turned. There she was, Karen Meadows, HOA president, self-appointed guardian of perfection. The woman who had once fined me $75 because my mailbox flag was faded. She stood there in her beige suit, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "This is a restricted area," she shouted over the roar. "You can't use water from the community line without authorization." I stared at her, speechless. The fire was eating through years of work, and she was worried about authorization. "Karen, my field's burning," I shouted back. "Get out of here before it spreads." Her eyes darted to the blaze, then to me. For a second, I thought I saw guilt flash across her face. A quick, flickering shadow. But it was gone as soon as it appeared. "You should have followed the HOA guidelines," she said stiffly. "No open flames. No unauthorized machinery." "Are you insane?" I stepped closer. "You think I started this?" She didn't answer, just hugged that clipboard tighter. Behind her, a sheriff's cruiser skidded onto the dirt road, lights blazing red and blue. Fire trucks followed, engines rumbling, men leaping out with hoses. "Everyone back!" one of them yelled. The fire had reached the western fence line, flames licking toward the neighbors' trees. The wind shifted, driving smoke across the road, turning the world into a gray blur. I coughed, choking. "We need water lines from the south." The captain nodded and barked orders. Hoses hissed, foam sprayed, and slowly, painfully, the fire began to retreat. When it was finally over, half my harvest was gone. Charred stalks leaned like broken soldiers. The air stank of ash and melted plastic. I stood there, numb, while firefighters coiled their hoses and wiped soot from their faces. Karen hovered nearby, her beige suit smudged, hair disheveled. For once, she didn't look superior, just small. "Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I'll make sure the HOA files the insurance paperwork. It might cover." I didn't even look at her. "Don't bother," I muttered. "This wasn't an accident, was it?" Her lips parted. "What are you implying?" But before I could answer, one of the deputies approached. "Mr. Lawson, we found something near the irrigation shed." He held up a small red canister, the kind used for lighter fluid. Karen froze. I saw it then. The flicker again, this time longer, guilt turning into fear. "You want to explain this?" the deputy asked her. Karen stammered, words tumbling out like pebbles down a slope. I don't know what that is. Maybe one of the workers." "Ma'am," he interrupted gently, "we'll need a statement." For a long moment, nobody spoke. The wind sighed through the blackened corn. Finally, she said, almost whispering, "I was just trying to teach him a lesson." My stomach turned. She looked at me, tears glinting in her eyes. "You were violating HOA policy." The corn was too high. The equipment was noisy, the community guidelines, they said. The guidelines? I said, my voice low. You burned my livelihood over guidelines? Her expression crumbled. I didn't mean for it to spread. I just wanted to scorch the edges. Make a point. I thought the ground was wet enough. The deputy stepped forward. Ma'am, that's arson. Firefighters had stopped their cleanup to listen. A hush fell across the field. Even the crackling embers seemed to hold their breath. Karen's face went pale. Arson? No, it was an accident. But the word hung in the air, heavy, final. The sheriff, a big man with a gray mustache, walked over and rested his hand on her shoulder. You'll need to come with us, ma'am. And just like that, the woman who had spent years lecturing us about lawn lengths and mailbox colors was led away in handcuffs, her clipboard falling into the dirt with a dull thud. As they drove off, I stood among the wreckage, smoke curling into the afternoon sky. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, justice, maybe, but mostly I felt hollow. No victory could bring back what I'd lost. A firefighter approached quietly. We stopped it just in time. Another 5 minutes and the whole neighborhood would have gone up. I nodded. Thanks, Captain. He hesitated. We'll file the report, but you might want to prepare for a long investigation. HOA involvement complicates things. Story of my life, I said bitterly. When everyone was gone, I walked through what remained of the field. The soil was still warm beneath my boots. I picked up a half-burned ear of corn, blackened but recognizable. Sarah? I whispered, feeling the weight of her memory in my chest. I tried. The wind shifted again, carrying away the last of the smoke. Somewhere, faintly, I could still hear the echo of Karen's protests, her disbelief that she could lose control of something so completely. That night I couldn't sleep. The house smelled like smoke no matter how many windows I opened. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the insurance forms, when a knock came at the door. It was Officer Daniels, the same deputy from earlier. Mr. Lawson, he said, removing his hat. We found something else. He laid a small, melted phone on the table. Security footage from the HOA cameras. She disabled most of them, but one caught her walking into your field just before the fire started. I closed my eyes. Daniels sighed. She's claiming stress. Says the HOA board pressured her. Lawyers are already circling. Let them circle, I said quietly. Truth doesn't burn that easy. He nodded and left. Outside, the moon rose over the ruined field, silver light washing over the scorched earth. And in that light I made a promise not just to rebuild but to fight back. Against the rules, the arrogance, the idea that a committee could own morality. Because the thing about fire is, once you've seen how fast it spreads, you learn to respect it, and you never underestimate what it can destroy. The next morning the world looked like the aftermath of a war. Thin veils of smoke drifted across my land, and every time the breeze moved, it carried the faint crackle of cooling ash. I thought I'd seen destruction before. Hurricanes, drought, even tornado winds that once stripped the roof off my barn. But this was different. This had been done by choice. By her choice. The county fire marshal arrived at sunrise with 2 assistants, their yellow jackets bright against the blackened earth. Drones hummed overhead, scanning for hot spots. I watched from the porch, coffee going cold in my hands again, as they measured the burn pattern. From up high, the damage looked like a dark fingerprint pressed into the earth, deliberate, circular, starting from the center of the southern row. Intentional ignition point, one of them murmured. I didn't need to hear more. Down the road, the HOA office sat pristine and untouched, its manicured hedges glistening with dew. I could see Karen's white SUV still parked in the lot, though I knew she wouldn't be driving it anytime soon. She was being held at the county station pending arraignment. By mid-morning, local news trucks had arrived. Their vans lined the street, satellite dishes whirring, microphones gleaming like fishing lures. Reporters swarmed the neighborhood entrance sign, the one boasting Cedar Ridge, a premier HOA community, as though the words themselves were ironic gold. When one spotted me, she hurried over, cameraman in tow. Mr. Lawson? Daniel Lawson. Yeah. Can you confirm reports that the HOA president is under investigation for arson? I hesitated. The smart move would have been to say no comment. But the smart move hadn't stopped my fields from burning. She's the one who lit it, I said evenly. You can check the footage. The reporter blinked. So the rumors are true? Truth doesn't need rumors, I said, echoing my words from the night before. The segment aired that evening. By sunset, my phone was buzzing nonstop. Neighbors, old friends, even strangers from town. Half offered sympathy, the other half gossip. And then came the HOA board's emergency meeting. It was held at the community center, the same spotless building where we used to argue about holiday decorations and fence paint. I hadn't attended in years, but this time I went. Inside, the air smelled of lemon cleaner and tension. The board sat in their usual row. 5 members, all volunteers, all suddenly looking like defendants instead of enforcers. At the far end sat him, George Pemberton, vice president, retired lawyer, and Karen's loudest supporter. He was already red-faced when I walked in. You have some nerve showing up here, Lawson, he snapped. You've turned this neighborhood into a media circus. Karen did that, I replied. Murmurs rippled through the small crowd of residents. Some avoided my gaze, others nodded quietly. The fire had scared them, not just the flames, but the idea that the people meant to protect order could create chaos instead. George slammed his palm on the table. Until a court rules, we're not assigning blame. And by HOA charter, we can't discuss ongoing legal. I stepped forward. You can discuss whatever you want, but you'll hear me first. I could feel every eye on me. You fined me for planting too close to the property line. You threatened legal action when I put up solar panels. You said my cornfield damaged community aesthetics. I didn't fight because I believed rules could coexist with decency. But Karen crossed that line, and you all built the fence she hid behind. A woman on the board, Ellen, lowered her head. She'd always been polite, always voted with Karen, but never seemed cruel. Daniel, she said softly, we didn't know she'd go that far. That's the point, I said. You never thought about how far you were pushing people. You built a system that values uniform lawns over human decency. Well, now it's on fire. Literally. Silence. Then, from the back of the room, a voice called out, he's right. It was Tom Reeves, ex-Marine, my next-door neighbor. For years, he'd stayed out of HOA politics. Now he stood, eyes sharp. We've all been bullied by her. Last month, she fined my wife for hanging a wind chime. Said it violated noise policy. We paid just to avoid trouble. More murmurs, louder this time. George tried to regain control. Let's stay civil. But the crowd was done being civil. A dozen residents stood, speaking at once. Stories of harassment, petty fines, threats of liens. The board members looked cornered, like people waking from a spell. Ellen raised a trembling hand. Motion to suspend Karen Meadows from all HOA duties effective immediately. Seconded, someone said. All in favor? Every hand went up. The gavel struck once. Just like that, the Queen of Cedar Ridge was dethroned. But I knew better than to celebrate. Because fires don't end when the flames go out. They smolder underground, waiting for air. That night, as rain began to fall for the first time in weeks, I sat by the window and watched the drops hiss against the still warm soil. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Hello. Pause, then a whisper. Mr. Lawson. It's Karen. I stiffened. How did you get my number? They let me make one call. Her voice cracked. Daniel, please. I'm being charged with felony arson. They said the footage makes it look deliberate, but I didn't mean. You did mean, I said quietly. No, I just wanted to burn a patch. A warning. You were defying the board, and they were threatening to vote me out. I panicked. Karen, you could have killed someone. She was crying now. I know, and I can't sleep. My husband left last year, my kids won't talk to me, and this HOA, it was all I had. Do you understand what that feels like? To need control because everything else is gone. Her words hit somewhere I didn't expect. Grief recognizes grief, even across enemy lines. I understand loss, I said after a long silence, but it doesn't give you the right to destroy other people's lives. The line went quiet. Then she whispered, I'm sorry, Daniel. I really am. Before I could answer, the call disconnected. I sat there a long time, listening to the rain. For a moment, I wondered if forgiveness was possible. But then I remembered the field, the years of work, the ashes in my hands. Forgiveness, maybe. Forgetting, never. By the next week, national news had picked up the story. HOA president arrested for arson, made for perfect headlines. Talk shows debated the tyranny of neighborhood associations. Online forums exploded. Some people called me a hero. Others said I was milking tragedy. I didn't care. What mattered was what came next. Insurance adjusters visited, clipboards clicking. The county declared the field a partial agricultural loss, meaning I'd get half what it was worth. But money couldn't replace what the fire had taken, not just crops, but trust. Neighbors began showing up with casseroles, tools, even seedlings. We'll help you replant, Tom said, handing me a spade. Community ought to mean something real, and for the first time it did. By late spring, tiny green shoots dotted the blackened soil. It wasn't the same corn, not Sarah's corn, but it was a start. Then, one afternoon, a black sedan rolled up. 2 men stepped out, suits crisp, expressions unreadable. Federal investigators. Mr. Lawson, the taller one said, flashing a badge. We're with the state fire marshal's office, working with the Department of Justice. We're expanding the investigation. Expanding? He nodded. Turns out, Karen wasn't acting entirely alone. HOA financial records show irregularities, unauthorized expenditures for compliance enforcement, funds used to hire private contractors, surveillance equipment. I frowned. Surveillance? Yes, cameras, drones, even chemical purchase orders. She may have had assistance maintaining control through intimidation. We're tracing where the money came from. A chill ran through me. You think someone on the board helped her? Possibly. Or an outside vendor. Either way, we'll need your testimony. The hearing took place 3 months later, in a courtroom that smelled of disinfectant and tension. Karen sat at the defense table, hands clasped, face pale but composed. She'd traded her beige suit for a simple gray dress. When our eyes met, she didn't look angry, just exhausted. The prosecutor laid out the case. The lighter fluid, the camera footage, the financial trail. Then came my turn on the stand. Mr. Lawson, the prosecutor asked, in your opinion, was this fire an act of negligence or intent? I looked at Karen. For a heartbeat, I saw the woman she might have been. Not the tyrant, but the lonely neighbor who just wanted order in a world that kept falling apart. Intent, I said quietly, but not hatred. Fear. Karen's eyes filled with tears. When the verdict came, the room was silent. Guilty on 1 count of arson. Sentence suspended to 2 years probation, mandatory community service, and restitution to me for damages. Some people said it wasn't enough. Maybe they were right. But punishment wasn't the moral I wanted. Redemption was. Weeks passed. Life resumed its uneven rhythm. The HOA dissolved under community vote, replaced by a volunteer committee focused on cooperation instead of control. One morning, while fixing the irrigation line, I saw a figure walking up the dirt path. Karen, in work gloves, carrying a trowel. I'm here to help, she said softly. Court orders me to serve 100 hours of community labor. I studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the edge of the field. Start over there. For hours we worked in silence, side by side. The sun was bright, the earth forgiving. At one point she straightened up, wiping sweat from her brow. You ever think some people need to lose everything, she said quietly, to finally see what matters? I met her gaze. Yeah, I said. I think about that every day. She smiled faintly, then went back to planting. By summer, the new corn stood waist-high. Children from the neighborhood came to help water it, laughing as they ran between the rows. The field lived again, not as mine alone, but as ours. Sometimes, when the wind rustled through the stalks, I thought I could hear Sarah's laughter again, soft and distant. And when I looked at Karen, kneeling in the soil she once tried to destroy, I saw something like peace, the fragile kind that only grows after fire. The first harvest after the fire came late. Not because the soil had forgotten how to give, but because trust takes longer to grow back than corn. By September, the field shimmered gold again. Not as tall as the years before, not as perfect, but alive. The air carried that same whispering sound I used to love, like the land was breathing again. And in a strange way, so was I. Karen came every morning now. No clipboard, no polished SUV. Just old jeans, mud-caked boots, and a quiet determination that didn't need to be announced. At first, the neighbors watched her from their porches, uncertain, whispering. But time has a way of sanding down edges. Eventually, they started waving. The day we cut the first row, she showed up before dawn. She didn't say a word, just handed me a thermos of coffee and stood beside me as the horizon turned orange. "I don't expect forgiveness," she said finally, "but I want to earn the chance to do something right." I nodded. "Then stop expecting. Just keep showing up." She smiled faintly. "That I can do." The news outlets had long moved on. HOA scandals weren't as exciting once the court dust settled. But inside Cedar Ridge, something new had taken root. Something real. Without the HOA's rigid control, the neighborhood changed. Fences got painted in different colors. Kids' bikes lay scattered across lawns again. Someone even put up Christmas lights before Thanksgiving. A small act of rebellion that felt like freedom. We called it the Cedar Ridge Renewal Project. Karen helped organize it. Not as a leader, but as a volunteer, the same woman who used to threaten fines for unapproved decorations was now teaching kids how to plant trees. And she worked like someone making up for lost time. In early October, I was invited to speak at the town's community forum. From control to compassion, lessons after the fire. Standing behind the microphone in that crowded hall, I wasn't sure what to say. The mayor had introduced me as the man who stood up to the HOA. But I didn't feel like a hero, just a survivor. "I used to think rules made communities stronger," I began. "Turns out, it's not rules that hold us together. It's grace. When you live in a world obsessed with order, it's easy to forget that people are messy. We make mistakes. We fall apart. Sometimes we burn things we never meant to. But forgiveness?" I paused, looking toward Karen in the front row. "Forgiveness is the only thing that can make anything grow again." The hall went silent. Then applause rippled through the crowd, slow and genuine. Afterward, a little boy came up to me. "My dad said you fought a fire," he said shyly. "Did it hurt?" I crouched down. "Yeah, but it's not the fire that hurts the most. It's what it takes from you. The trick is learning how to build something stronger from what's left." He nodded, as if he understood more than most adults ever would. That winter, Karen stopped by one evening with a stack of papers. "I'm moving," she said. The words hit harder than I expected. "Where to?" "North Carolina. My daughter finally called. She wants me to live closer." I think she saw the news about the fire. Said it scared her into remembering that life's too short to stay angry. I smiled. "That's good." She hesitated. "I wanted to thank you. Not for forgiving me. I still don't deserve that. But for not letting me disappear. I thought everyone would hate me forever." "Some did," I admitted. "But hate doesn't last long when someone's willing to change." She looked out at the field, now dormant under a soft layer of frost. "Funny. I used to think control kept people safe. Turns out it only builds cages. And cages burn easy," I said. Karen laughed quietly, a sound I never thought I'd hear from her. "You're right. I'll miss this place." We stood there a while, two unlikely allies bound by ash and redemption. Before she left, she turned back. "Do you think they'll remember me as the woman who burned your field?" I smiled sadly. "Maybe, but I'll remember you as the one who helped it grow back." She nodded once, eyes glistening, then drove off into the twilight. Spring came early that year. The soil, nourished by time and rain, felt softer than before. I tilled it carefully, planting new rows of corn with the same patience Sarah once taught me. Don't rush the earth, she used to say. It gives back what you give it. The community came again, just like last year. Families, kids, even retirees who hadn't worked a field in decades. We planted together, laughed together. And when the sun dipped below the horizon, we stayed to watch the stars. No rules, no fines, just people. When the corn reached knee-high, I put up a small wooden sign at the edge of the field. It read, "Forgiveness grows here." Every passerby stopped to look. Some took pictures. A few left flowers. The local newspaper wrote a short piece, "From Ashes to Abundance, How One Man's Field Became a Town's Second Chance." They got one thing right: it wasn't about me anymore. It was about us. A few months later, I received a postcard. Front, a photo of the Blue Ridge Mountains. Back, Daniel. The view here is calm, nothing to control, just to admire. I started volunteering at a local shelter. It feels good to help without a rulebook. I hope your harvest is kind this year. Karen. I kept that postcard pinned to the fridge. Not as a reminder of the fire, but of what came after, the rare kind of healing that happens when pride finally gives way to humility. By midsummer, Cedar Ridge had become something it was never meant to be, not a showcase of perfection, but a portrait of forgiveness. The lawns weren't uniform anymore. Some had wildflowers. Others had messy gardens or mismatched fences. But it was alive. People waved when they passed. Neighbors actually talked. I started holding small gatherings in the field, open-air movie nights, barbecues, even a little autumn fair. We called it the Harvest of Kindness. At the first one, I stood by the makeshift stage watching kids chase fireflies. The air smelled like grilled corn and laughter. The town's pastor, a soft-spoken man, came up beside me. "You know," he said, "that woman Karen, she came back last week, quietly, didn't tell anyone, left a donation for the community garden. No note, just the check." I smiled. Sounds like her. She said she'd stop by next harvest, maybe to see how forgiveness grows. I looked out over the field, where the new crop swayed in the breeze, gold under a soft pink sky. "It grows just fine," I said. That night, after everyone left, I stayed behind. The moon hung low, lighting the corn in silver. I could almost hear voices. Sarah's laughter, Karen's apology. The echoes of neighbors who had once been strangers. Maybe that's what redemption really is, not the erasing of mistakes, but the decision to plant again anyway. I picked up a handful of soil and let it slip through my fingers. It was rich, dark, alive. "Fire took everything," I whispered. "But it gave us something better." A soft wind moved through the stalks, carrying the sound of life, gentle, forgiving, endless. Moral of the story: true community isn't built by control. It's built by compassion. Rules can protect lawns, but only grace can heal hearts. When pride burns everything down, forgiveness is the only seed worth planting again. Call to action, CTA. Fire if this story moved you. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that forgiveness is stronger than Ange. Ear of Corn, rebuild, forgive, and let your own kindness grow. Because every field of ash can bloom again if we choose to plant love instead of blame.